What were you doing before then, and what caused you to go like, all right, that's it. I'm building my own business, and here we go, off to the races.
The story's a little more convoluted than that. I probably should have elaborated more. So the company that I run, Northwest Mosh Removal, has actually been around since 1995. It's actually almost a 30-year-old company. I worked for this company in high school and college. The previous owner before me was a family friend of mine. And she actually helped me start my first company, which was not this company.
Are you poaching from like a different industry? Like, walk me through how you find good people for your business. I feel like that's the hardest thing for most service businesses to figure out.
You can train somebody from scratch so much easier than you can find an experienced carpenter or an experienced electrician or an experienced plumber.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Superpro podcast, the heartbeat of home service excellence. I'm Roland and Chris. I'm your host. I'm the co-founder of Housecall Pro, and I'm an advocate for all the hardworking pros out there helping make our homes better, safer, and more comfortable. Through Housecall Pro, I've had the privilege of supporting hundreds of thousands of pros just like you, empowering you all to achieve more, stress less, and redefine success in our industry. I'm super excited because today we're talking to Chris Olson. He's the owner of NW Northwest Moss Removal. It's a brand new company, or brand new-ish. In just a couple years, Chris has taken his company from an idea to a staple in the community with deep-rooted client relationships and a commitment to quality service. They service the greater Seattle area with three trucks. He's got 2 full-time crews, 6 employees, his wife helping the office, 2 young kids at home, an $800K 2024 revenue goal. Next year, he's going to break the 7-figure $1 million mark. We're going to unpack everything that drives him, the values that he set for his company, and also the challenges he's faced in that's a pretty competitive market. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, you started the business just a couple years ago. What were you doing before then, and what caused you to go like, all right, that's it. I'm building my own business, and here we go, off to the races.
Yeah. So, man, the story's a little more convoluted than that. I probably should have elaborated more. So the company that I run, Northwest Mosh Removal, has actually been around since 1995.
Oh, wow.
It's actually almost a 30-year-old company. I worked for this company in high school and college. The previous owner before me was a family friend of mine. And she actually helped me start my first company, which was not this company. I was a general contractor prior to running this company day to day. I built decks, patios, outdoor living spaces, and large construction jobs. And then I'm also a full-time firefighter paramedic for a municipal fire department in my area. So I have a quote unquote day job. Originally my first company was, I had too much time off from the fire department and I wanted to do something else on my days off. So I started a handyman company. It's probably a classic story, but handyman company grew to small jobs, grew to large jobs, I woke up one day and I had 15 employees and doing $3 million a year in construction jobs, and it was turning my hair gray. It was an absolute nightmare sometimes. And a couple of years after I started that company in 2021, 2022 area, the owner of this company approached me and said, hey, we're looking to retire. We'd like to sell the business, but we don't want to go through the hassle of trying to get the company ready to sell. So they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was they offered to have me write them a check for $50K, which was essentially what they valued the fixed assets of the company at: the vans, the tools, the equipment. And for that $50,000, they gave me the company, the client list, the website, the Facebook page,
Wow.
the GMB, the history, everything.
Wow.
And I took it over. And for the couple years after that, until last year, I actually ran both companies.
Wow.
The construction company was underwater. It's, as many of you guys listening probably know, general contracting is a very fickle industry, and it's really easy to make a lot of money and really easy to lose a lot of money. And I woke up one day and realized that the debt load versus income load I had in that company wasn't very sustainable. I didn't really want to do the work to try and salvage it and get it back on top. So I shut down, closed down, and wrote everything off and put all of my focus and attention into this company, which is what I do every day now. I still work for the fire department full time, but I also run this company day to day.
Wow. All right. So you're busy, and you got 2 kids at home.
3.
That's three
Yeah,
kids at home.
I have 2 stepdaughters that are 5 and 3, and then a 10-month-old son.
Oh, wow. All right. So you're a busy man. So you don't sleep essentially. And
I actually, as funny as that is, I have averaged between 4 and 6 hours of sleep a night for probably 10 years, but partially because the fire department royally screws your sleep schedule.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you're doing all kinds of funky hours. You're always on call too.
Yeah.
That's not easy. So you obviously had a background in building a big business
Mhm.
and you had this great opportunity. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
steal of a deal for everything that you got. That's amazing. Did you know anything about, exterior cleaning, moss removal? Is
Yeah.
there anything like in the trade that you were able to bring into it, or you're just like, teach me and you just learned real quick?
So, well, a couple of things. One is, like I said, I worked for this company in high school. So I actually worked for the company full time as an employee in the field for 2.5 years. I knew the business really well as far as the field operations go. I didn't know the back end of a service company, but when I started my construction company, the previous owner of this company, this woman named Connie, who was a family friend of mine, taught me a lot of what I learned in my first company. She was one of the people that I would call and ask questions to, help me understand business, both the upsides and the downsides. Gave a different perspective being a business owner for 20 plus years. And when I started my company, she actually tried to talk me out of it, as funny as that is. She said, "Hey, you already have a good job. Why are you going to go into this craziness of starting a business? Like, I've done it for 20 years and I think about quitting every 6 months." And most business owners will relate to that. It's the most rewarding, but simultaneously the most frustrating thing you'll ever do.
For
And
sure.
it's a love-hate relationship always.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when she decided to retire, she approached me about it because she basically had the company at a point where the company was always profitable, always made good money. They had survived off of the income from the company for a long time. She ran this business, and then her husband was a union longshoreman. But they
Mm.
had a lot of kids. They did a lot of stuff, so they made good money, but they never grew the company to a point where it was really sustainable long term. It was the kind of company where you'll hear the term like you don't really have a company, you have a job that you own.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it was the business was at a point where if she took a week long vacation, the place would burn down while she was gone. So I joke all the time. She ran the company for 20 years with a subscription to QuickBooks Desktop on a $500 Dell computer from Costco and a spiral bound notebook. Didn't have a
Wow.
CRM,
Yeah.
didn't have systems in place, didn't have training procedures, didn't have anything. Just
Wow.
hourly employees, constant revolving door of new employees every few years. There's only one employee that stayed there for longer than probably 3 or 4 years, and that guy still works for me. He's been with the company for 15 years.
Wow. Dang.
And
Okay. So
he
you got
and
some crew with it too.
yeah,
That's a good
and
part of the deal.
hilariously
Yeah.
enough, he's in his mid 30s now. He's a couple years older than me, and he actually trained me when I got hired there in high school, and is still with
And
the
now the
company.
roles are reversed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he's still the guy that trains everybody new in the field. He knows the business and the industry inside and out, cold. He's super good at it, super efficient, and can train all of our new folks. He's my senior technician that is the guy that all the new folks ride with for their first 3 to 6 months before they go off on their
Nice.
own.
Is he just still an employee, or is he also like a part owner? Do you give him any equity, or how does that kind of work?
He's not a part owner, but he gets paid very, very well for the amount of work he does, and he's involved in a lot of the back end of the business. So he does the inventory management, he deals with chemicals, supplies, and equipment maintenance, does a lot of coordination, and is heavily involved in our training procedures and the HR side of the company. He doesn't
Yeah.
really have a lot of desire to be an owner, from what I can tell. I think he would like to someday, but I,
Yeah.
I I also get the feeling from him talking to him over the years that he very much enjoys being able to shut his phone off at 5 o'clock, clock out, and be home with his family and not have to worry about work when he's not at work. Because
Yeah.
he knows how stressed business owners are, and I think that
Well,
on
he was
some
with the
level
business
he
for
doesn't
so
want
long,
that.
so he probably saw it all,
Yeah,
you know? Yeah, for
yeah, well, and
sure.
he was with the business through 2008. He was with the business through COVID.
Oh.
I mean, he's seen the downsides and he's seen the upsides, and he's seen the
Hmm.
company when it has 5 or 6 trucks on the road, and he's seen the company when there was a period of about 6 months where he was the only employee.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he did
Yeah,
everything. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
There
yeah,
was
yeah.
there was a period during COVID where the previous owner laid everybody besides him off, and
Wow.
he was the only one working in the field.
And so you obviously rebuilt the company. You've got some great crew on the road now.
Mhm.
Where are you finding these people? Like, how are you doing it? Are you finding them fresh and training from scratch? Because you mentioned a
Yeah,
little bit of that, or are you poaching from like a different industry? Like, walk me through how you find good people for your business. I feel like that's the hardest thing for most service businesses to figure out.
yeah. So I like I said, I came from a construction background, and one of the reasons that I shut down the construction company and I stuck with service, and why I'm a firm believer that if you want to like start a company as a new business owner, that service is the way to go, is that you can train somebody from scratch so much
Hmm.
easier than you can find an experienced carpenter or an experienced electrician or an experienced plumber. And you don't get an experienced employee that comes with bad habits or bad routines or high expectations with low output. You really get to pick from the cream of the crop of the 20-something-year-olds that are good, reliable, show up on time, clean drug test, clean driving record, has a driver's license, for goodness sakes, and will show up to work. And the nice thing about our industry specifically is exterior cleaning is really hard, dirty work, but it's really easy. So I can get somebody from fresh scratch off the street to leading a crew in 6 months to a year.
Oh, wow.
You can't do that in electrical or plumbing or HVAC or any other home service. I mean, it takes, in my construction company, I mean, I had apprentices that were 2 or 3 years into working for me that still could barely do their job, let alone lead a job. So with this company, like one of my crew leads, for example, he was a 24-year-old kid when I hired him. He's been with the company for a little over a year now. He's 25 now. And he grew up with a family where his uncle and his dad's cousin, I think, were all roofers. So he had roofed houses in high school and college for like extra cash on the weekends kind of thing. And then he had done other jobs since then. But when he saw the ad and came to work for me, he had never done exterior cleaning, but he was very comfortable on ladders, on roofs, driving a van, carrying heavy loads like that. I didn't have to train him or worry about that. Yep. And he became a crew lead like 6 months after working for me because he just picked it up so quick. And he's a hardworking kid. He wants success in his future. He's very motivated to be successful and driven. He's always asking how he can do more, what kind of responsibility he can take on. And pardon me. That is so much more valuable to me than somebody who maybe works for one of my competitors and comes to ask me for a job. I know that he is rock solid, and I know that he's gonna be here for a while. And I know
that kind of loyalty built in a little bit, because you're the one that helped get him to the place where he is now. And
exactly. Yeah. And I know that if he comes to me and asks me for a raise, that he deserves it. So like he's gotten, gosh, I'd have to go back and look, but he's gotten 3 raises in a year and a few months. And he's doing awesome. And he jumped from a trainee to apprentice to crew lead to he'll probably be a senior technician in another year. That's great. And for background on that, I won't go into a ton of detail, but we have a pay scale that has titles, and senior technician is just a pay step title. It's not a certification or anything.
Right. Yeah. But it's some leveling that you have built in part of your process of your company. Our mastery ladder in our company is based on performance, but it's also based on the number of different services that you're able to do without assistance or supervision. So the difference between technician 1, technician 2, technician 3, and senior technician is the only thing that you can't bump up to without having leadership and training, and it's a little bit more subjective, is senior technician. Technician 1, 2, and 3 is just based on the number of services that you're capable of doing without supervision. So if you can just do roof cleaning, you're a technician 1. If you can roof clean and pressure wash, you're a technician 2. If you can roof clean, pressure wash, window clean, and do minor repairs, you're a technician 3. Got it. And how did you come up with that structure? Is that something that you took from like the previous business owners, or that you learned? Is this something that you came up with specifically?
I made
for
it
your
all
business?
from scratch. Previous owner never did any of that stuff. Previous owner basically just kept them at one pay rate and kept them there until they came and threatened to leave, or if they didn't get a raise.
And so that's why they couldn't scale. That makes a lot of sense. And so as you're thinking about your business, you mentioned you're going to be breaking the 7-figure mark next year. You're going to put another truck on the road. Where are you finding and generating the business to do this? What are your marketing channels? What are your lead sources? How are you getting that inbound flow?
Yeah, so a handful of different ways. The biggest one and the most consistent source is we have a very large existing client base. So we have 13 to 15,000 clients in our database. We actually use Housecall Pro's marketing tools to retarget and remarket our client base. That was one of the things that I was chatting about before the podcast that I wanted to mention in that kind of second half of the podcast is there are some features that Housecall Pro has that really allow us to retarget and remarket our client base in the marketing center. But then also we have automatic follow-ups and lead flows for every service we do for recurring service plans. So we're using the service plan feature, we're using the marketing center, and we're really using those tools to get a lot of repeat business from our already existing clients. As far as new clients go, we're really big on Yelp. Total side note, please sometime soon get a Yelp integration with the inbox on Housecall Pro. I'm going to put a promo in for that.
Nice. That may or may not be on the roadmap. Yeah, that may or may not be on the roadmap already. Yeah.
I know there's an Angie's List one in trial phase, and I would love to have the same features for Yelp. That'd be awesome. But we advertise on Yelp. We advertise on Google local services. We advertise on normal Google. And then we also do a lot of Facebook and social media marketing. Not paid ads on Facebook and social media, but one of the things that my VA does is they're in probably 100 different local community pages. Wow. And they look for those people that are asking for services. And we get a lot of organic referrals, but we also tag our own business page in a lot of those community pages and get business that way as well.
Okay. So they're like a different person in there. And so when someone asks a question, they'd be like, oh, Northwest Monsterville. Like, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife does that, my VA does that, and my employees do that, where if anybody's scrolling Facebook and they see somebody asking for services, they tag us. And then we have lots of existing clients that do that too. I probably get a dozen leads a month from somebody that's like, hey, my neighbor posted in our HOA's Facebook page that they need this, and I sent them your way. Or, hey, I saw your truck at my neighbor's house last month, and I wrote down your number, and now I want to get mine done. Because it's like you kind of mentioned at the beginning, the Seattle market's very competitive for this service, but there's so much work that there's probably a half a dozen larger reputable companies and probably 30 smaller companies that do these services.
Wow.
And there's still tons of work to go around. I mean, I'd love to take up more market share, but there's enough work to go around right now where unless I tripled, quadrupled, or like 10 times in size, I'm not going to hit a wall of not having enough business.
Well, I mean, I think that's definitely a benefit of working in a larger market and being able to have like different counties and things that you can service relatively easily. And obviously in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to get a lot of this. And I can only imagine the amount of repeat business. If you do a good job, I assume everyone needs to have you come out at least once a year, or at least once every couple of years.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's one of the reasons one of the reasons we switched to Housecall was for the service plan feature. One of the many.
Yep.
But that's one of the things that we do is we probably have 300 to 500 clients that do a service with us every year, but the previous owner never tracked it. So there was never a way to track that amount of recurring revenue or track those contracts or agreements. It was basically just hey, we cleaned your house, call us in a year, we'll come back. And we get,
hopefully they call you back.
Yeah. And I get so many of those calls where it's like, hey, you cleaned my house a year ago, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. I want to get a repeat service done. But those were never captured. So I'm slowly one by one at every single one of those people I can, putting them on a service plan. Obviously, certain people don't like recurring agreements, contracts, or putting a card on file. So sometimes people say no. But I mean, we started doing that a few months ago, and I think we have 20 or 30 signed up already. And I'm sure we're just going to keep growing from there.
Wow. I mean, the ability to keep cards on file and to charge it, that is something that I think not enough businesses take advantage of, especially for recurring places, because once you have that customer's on lock.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I also set up a commission system for my employees where if my employees go out and do a service and they can sign somebody up on a service plan, they get 10% of that service plan every year that customer stays on a plan. So not just on the initial sale, but they are automatically by default assigned to that customer. So every year, as long as they work for the company, they'll be the ones that go back to that appointment. And if they do a good job, keep that customer on a plan, every year they get that 10%, 10%, 10%.
Wow, so that's a really good method.
Yeah, it's compounding business for the company, but the way I sold it to the employees, it's compounding commission for them too. Because theoretically, any employee that really wanted to hustle, they could land 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 contracts, and it's an extra $5,000, $10,000 a year for them. And they also get sales commission on full services too. So if they're doing an $800 roof service at a house and the neighbor walks over and asks them about the company, if they can pull their tablet out of the van, get all their information and sell and schedule the job, they get 10% of that sale. Wow. So if they can do it same day, if they can run over and do it same day, they get 10%. If they do it a different day scheduled out in the future, they get a fixed $50. The way that I sold it to them is $50 is the average cost per lead that we pay for advertising. So I'm basically giving that to them if they sell the job instead of us. But if they do it same day, then they're doing that and saving us travel time in the future. So if they're willing to work a little bit later or hustle a little bit and get it done same day, they get an extra 20, 30, $40 in commission, depending on the size of the job.
Oh, I love the way you position that to the employees, because not only does it make like logical sense, but from a business perspective, you're like, yeah, look, I'd rather pay my employee an extra $50 than go give it to Mr. Google.
Give it to Google or Yelp. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like why do that? And your employees will be way happier.
I'm gonna spend the money to acquire the customer anyways.
Yeah, just do it anyways. I like it. And so talk to me about your service plan. Like, how does it work? Do they get billed monthly, yearly, or is it just a reminder?
So we do both. So I have three service plan options: silver, gold, platinum. Silver is
Mhm.
once a year. They pay once a year or monthly. I have the option for both.
Yep.
Personally, honestly, I prefer yearly because it's easier. So I just say, hey, you're going to get serviced every November. November 1st, you're going to get charged $375 plus tax. We'll call you on November 1st. Say, hey, when do you want us to come out? Okay, November 15th. Cool, you're on the calendar. And I have it set up in House Call where they get a reminder in October saying, hey, your service plan's set to renew November 1st, and we'll be calling you for an appointment. If for some reason they want to cancel, they can call and cancel. But what I tell customers is I'm like, hey, it's an open-ended agreement that's going to be in place indefinitely. You don't have to stay on it. If you want to cancel, all you got to do is call us for your billing date. But
Mhm.
I haven't had anybody cancel yet.
Yeah. Well, I think, the reality is like whatever the path of least resistance, most
Yeah.
people, if you're doing a great job, they'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
great, because it's one extra
It's
thing they don't have to remember.
exactly. It's off their to-do list. They don't have to remember to do it. They don't have to be home. They don't have to deal with the hassle. And then we also do it for other services too. So we have
Mm.
quarterly and annual window cleaning agreements for both residential and commercial clients. We have
Mhm.
annual roof treatment contracts, annual or biannual gutter cleaning contracts, and we have annual or biannual inspection agreements too. And any of our other service plans include 10% off other services too. So if you're on a
Oh, so
roof
they'll
cleaning,
bundle it.
yeah, so if you're on a roof cleaning agreement, you get 10% off any service. And a lot of people are already
Mm.
taking advantage of that. A great example is we're doing a job today where the customer signed up on a service plan a few months ago. Today's their first service, but they called me last week and said, hey, while you're here, can you hang our Christmas lights? And I said, yeah, sure.
Ah,
It's 3 hours of labor, $300, but you get 10% off. So it's 270 plus tax. Takes the guys a couple hours while they're there, and it's an easy extra couple $100 of revenue on a job we were already driving to. Same
oh,
thing applies where if they want like, hey, I want my skylights cleaned. Hey, I want the windows cleaned. Hey, can you pressure wash the driveway? A lot of times we can book it on the same day as the service appointment that's already paid for. So we're saving drive time, saving travel time. So that 10% is usually made up in savings of travel and labor and everything else.
oh, wait, and even way more than that probably
Yeah,
because you're thinking
absolutely.
about like an hour drive time plus
Hmm.
like wear and tear plus,
Yep,
just
absolutely.
oh yeah, you're easily doing way better than that. And obviously, if you let the customer know beforehand, hey, we're going to be coming to your house. Here's the five other things we could do to your
Hmm.
house while we're there, and you get 10% off. They might be like, oh yeah, you know what? You're right. I might as well have Chris's team do the windows too, or those
Hmm.
extra pieces. Whereas before, you might not have had the opportunity to really talk about bundling something else,
Yeah.
and now you've already earned the right, which is cool. Um,
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about all these House Call Pro features. What do you think is the most underrated House Call Pro feature? What's one that people don't recognize is cool, but like, man, like this thing is underrated. Not enough people
That's
like recognize it.
that's easy. There are so I was talking to, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else from House Call when I first signed up, like 2 weeks after I signed up. And it blew my mind seeing in the House Call Pro Facebook group and even in the Superpro Facebook group that there's like at least 10 questions a day about how do I find this? How do I track this? How do I find this? And almost all of them can be solved by just having pipeline.
Yeah.
Like pipeline is the number one best feature that House Call Pro has, in my opinion. It's a no brainer. Like I got a month free trial when I signed up on my plan, and I looked at it like once, and I told the guy that signed me up, I was like, "There's no way I'm canceling this. This is I don't think I could use House Call Pro without this."
Yeah.
After I've had it since I signed up, and it blows me away that there are so many people that use House Call without it because they
Hmm.
must. I mean, I guess if you're a one man show and you're only doing like one job a day by yourself, maybe, but managing multiple crews, 4, 5, 6 jobs a day, and like on an average day, 20, 30 open estimates, 10 or 15 unscheduled jobs, 20 or 30 invoices, like all these different places. Pipeline makes it so that I can click 2 or 3 buttons, get an overview, big picture of where the company's at and what needs to get done and what I need to do first when I sit down at my desk in the morning, and just simplifies the whole process that I used to have in 10 different places.
Yeah, and sometimes a lot of people are like, "Well, what's the inspiration for it or whatever?" It's technically called like a Kanban board,
Hmm.
but like who says Kanban? I don't know. It sounds like something
I don't know.
not from here. And they're like,
It
I don't know
sounds
what
like
that
a
is.
pastry you'd buy at a fancy coffee shop.
Oh yeah, exactly. So you can't call it Kanban, but it is literally your pipeline. But it
Yeah.
really was just mimicked what is in a lot of service businesses. They'll just have like a big whiteboard.
Yeah.
Either they'll have like folders on the wall, and
Hmm.
they'll have it in literally like
Exactly.
different stages, and
Yeah.
they just move the papers from left to right. And this is just a digital version of it that you could just
Yeah.
boom
Well,
have on your monitor.
yeah, and what it reminded me of was like I have a bunch of friends that work in sales and other industries, and it reminded me of like the dashboard in Salesforce, where it's
Yep.
like the big picture overview of like all your different leads and clients and estimates and proposals and where people are at. Like
Yep.
like if you're selling used cars on Salesforce, you're like, okay, these people have reached out, these people have asked for this, these people are in the process, these people are pending, these people are in financing. Like it's the
Yep.
same kind of thing, but for a trade business where it's a big picture overview of where all of your leads, estimates, jobs, invoices, pending are all in the same place. And it's just so easy to navigate. And I love that it's just as easy to navigate on my phone or my iPad as it is on my desktop. Because I mostly use it on my desktop. But on the days that I'm out in the field, I mean, it's crazy that I can get a phone call from a client and find them so easily, because even on my phone, it's easy to find pipeline, find different places, and search clients based on name or by location or whatever.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I think it just makes you come across as a more organized business owner. So when you are on the
Yeah,
phone with a client, they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. They're just looking at my notes. Boom. Yeah. It's all there. Oh, this is great. This is like a legit
exactly. Yeah.
operation. And then the second piece, which is like, oh, this is a legit operation. I'm more comfortable spending more money because this is a higher end
Hmm.
service. This isn't
Yep.
some, person in a truck, that just kind of
Exactly.
rolling
Yeah.
around with some papers that are getting lost. This is like, no, they're on top of it. They know what they
Hmm.
charged me last time. I feel like it's a fair price. They're going to charge me the same next time. All of
Yep.
it's there. Um, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's something now that you know about Housecall Pro that you're like, oh, I should have used this right out of the gate? Or maybe for someone else too, that you're like, oh man, if you're coming in, if you're not using this straight out of the gate, you're going to be kicking yourself.
Yeah. I mean, pipeline for sure. I
Yeah.
signed up for Marketing Center right away, but I actually didn't use it for the first couple of months. I had House Call because I was too busy doing everything else. But
Hmm.
I think I told Shayna beforehand when I was talking to her before the recording that when I took over the company, the customer database had never been retargeted. So one of the first things I did when I built out the Marketing Center and House Call is I pulled up my database, and out of 12 or 13,000 clients, I have 9 or 10,000 that have emails listed. And I went ahead and I sent out an email blast to the whole list. And I sent out like 9,000 emails in one list. And it was the simplest email. It basically said, hey, this is Chris from Northwest Moss Removal. We appreciate you being an existing client. We just wanted to touch base, see how you're doing, and let you know that we've added these services. Because for the first 20 years the company existed, they only did roof cleaning. So I said, hey, by the way, we're doing pressure washing, window cleaning, minor exterior repairs, et cetera, et cetera. And for any client already in our database, you get 10% off if you want to try any new service. And for a limited time, anybody that calls and mentions this email gets 10% off their next service, regardless of what it is. And that email blast booked $70,000 worth of work.
Okay, so that paid for Housecall Pro indefinitely, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I know I could do the same thing with something like MailChimp, but the fact that everything's in one dashboard, everything's right there. It uses my client customer list, and I love the fact that in Marketing Center and House Call you can customize based on things like, okay, every customer that does a service over this many dollars, they get a follow-up email in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, reminding them to get a follow-up service. Any customer that gets an annual maintenance gets a reminder in a year to get another annual maintenance. Any customer that doesn't book their estimate gets a follow-up in 90 days saying, hey, we just want to check in with you. And I've set all those up, and all of those campaigns have returned customers as well. The one that surprised me the most was I've gotten probably a dozen jobs from the one that I set up where if a customer declines their estimate, it follows up with them in a month to check in with them.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of guys, they're like,
probably aren't even doing it, like,
yeah, well, or they
think
like
it's
saw the
dead
price and they
money.
were like, oh, I can't afford that. And then they look around and they realize everybody else is the same price. They just kind of give up. But if you're
Yep.
the top of mind professional company, they call you back when they decide, okay, I do have to get this done.
I think that's such a good like golden nugget right there for a lot of pros. Like if you get a declined estimate, they're like, okay, whatever, I'm going to move on, and you never touch again. But the reality
Yep.
is like this person called you for a reason. They probably found
hmm
you online or heard from you from a recommendation, or you had great reviews. Whatever the reason is that they contact your company, there was a reason, you
Yeah.
know. And so they're in your database. Like don't
Yeah.
feel ashamed reaching back out, especially on declined estimates,
Oh
because
yeah.
you might not know what people's financial situation is. Maybe they didn't have
hmm
$900 to clean their roof right then and there, you know? Like whatever it ran into, it
Yep.
might not be like they didn't like you or they didn't like the price. They just might have not have had the money for it, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the story I always tell about that is when I was in construction, I was part of a couple of different like mastermind networking coaching type programs, and there was one where they really hammered that during one of our coaching sessions about, hey, if you're not retargeting your clients that didn't move forward with you, you're missing out. And one of the guys in the group I was in at the time, he went through, I believe it was 2 years worth of declined proposals, and he was a kitchen and bath remodel contractor. And he, from those declined estimates, booked like a half a dozen jobs totaling like $800,000 just by going
Yeah.
through those declined estimates and sending out text messages and follow-up calls to people that had worked with him in the last couple of years. And I imagine it was especially impactful because the way he does is he's a design build company. So a lot of those people had actually paid him to do design work, but then weren't able to afford the budget for the whole project. But then if he called them back in 6 months to a year and they've put some money in their savings account and they're like, okay, now we can spend the $35,000 on our master bathroom or the 80 grand on the kitchen we actually want. Because a lot of times in construction, when I was doing remodeling, it was not a matter of we can't afford it. It was we have $50,000 budgeted and the kitchen we want costs 80. So if you call them back in a year, they might have that other 30 stashed away now that they've had some time to save for it and they know what they want.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, and you know, it comes down to in Housecall Pro, you also have like consumer financing options and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Where you know, if you're not presenting people with whatever method they want, I always pros
Absolutely.
are like,
Yeah.
why I only do cash and check. I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, because you're
No.
saving yourself a couple percentage points. Like, no way. No, why
Yeah.
would you do
No.
that? Yeah.
Build it into your cost of doing business. That's one of the number one things that I've taken away from the last 5 years. I had a business coach years ago that his favorite saying was, stop making it hard for your customers to give you money.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, it sounds so dumb when you say it out loud, but there are so many contractors that are like, I only take cash and check, or I'm going to charge you a 3% fee if you want to swipe a card, or whatever it is. And I'm like, bro, go to your overhead calculations, raise your prices by 5%, and then offer a 3% discount to people that pay cash. It's not that
Yep.
hard. And you're not going to lose jobs because you raise your prices by 3% or 5%. If you do, you're in a way too competitive of a market.
Yeah, I think you're probably losing jobs if you tell customers that you can only accept cash or check.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like if someone told me that too, it's just like, well, why
Well,
not? Just put on a credit card or whatever.
yeah.
I don't care if it's built into the pricing. Just make it easy on me
Yeah.
because I actually don't have a checkbook. Well, I do, but I don't even know where it is. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I have
used it forever.
I have a business checkbook, but like I joke
Yeah.
all the time, like I'm a 29-year-old millennial. You know how many times I've written a check in my life that wasn't for my business? Like, yeah, I've got business checks in a binder behind my desk that I use to write commercial checks and pay vendor accounts and things like that. But even 90% of that now is credit cards and debit cards.
Right. Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
I think the only time I've ever written checks is when I was 18 years old. I had a landlord that made me mail him checks to pay rent. So I think I went to my bank and got a stack of those paper printed counter checks that cost like 20 cents when you write them, just so that I could write my landlord checks. And I think besides that, I've never written a check to pay for anything in my personal life besides business.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, look, like inside of Housecall Pro too, it's you got the software side, but you also have the financial side. And so, you know, it's one of the things we have expense cards because if you've got people in the field that are having
we use
to
'em.
buy like random stuff, you know, like why have them do something cash out of pocket? They forget, and you have to like reimburse them and all that stuff. You guys use expense cards. Tell me how are you doing it? Do you cap them at a certain amount of dollars? Do you have it uncapped? How often do you refresh it? Like how do you run it?
Yeah, so I do a pretty simple one. I have every employee has a card. My crew leads have $1,000 a week limit. My crew members have a couple hundred. They rarely make a purchase that is over. Like the most expensive thing I usually see come across is filling up trucks, like $100, $120 to fill up the gas tank. Very rarely do they spend more than that. Dylan, my main lead guy that I was telling you about earlier, he occasionally spends more, but usually it's on something like, hey, one of the blowers needs to go to the equipment shop to get maintenance. That's $200 or $300, or we need to buy a new ladder, or buy a new leaf blower, or buy something for the crew. But most of the big purchases, like, he manages the inventory, but when we order chemicals, he doesn't use his card. He just calls the vendor. We have a Net 30 account. He places the order and it shows up at the shop. So those employee expense cards, we probably spend, I don't know, maybe $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. And I just have it set up where it automatically tops off the account from our invoices, because we use Housecall Pro to process payments and deposit checks too. So I just have it set where that account never dips below, I think it's either $500 or $1,000. And it just auto refills when invoices and checks are pending. And I've never had it run out. Yeah, exactly. And I get the cash back from it too. I just saw an email yesterday, actually, I think, for like, I got like a $50 or $60 cash back rewards on it for the month from what the guy spent. So it's free money. It's easy. And for me, it's way safer and way easier than having something like corporate credit cards with employee accessory cards, or giving them a debit card to the company checking account. Like, all of those come with risks and liability, whereas having them in house call and having them be directly tied to our system is just so easy and simple. And I love that from either my phone or my computer, I can turn them on and off. I can adjust limits on the fly, and it's instant. It's easy.
Yeah. Well, and you get notifications when they're spending, in real time. And so you can kind of keep an eye on things without having to worry about, all of a sudden at the end of the month, you're like, whoa, what's this bill? And then you're scrambling, and you're like, oh, cash flow, oh, that's not so good, and then, you're stuck. And that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things I made a mistake of in my last company is I did not do good cash flow forecasting. And that's one of the reasons we ended up underwater, because we kept in this endless cycle of either using deposits from a customer that we haven't actually finished the work for to pay for current bills, or borrowing money to pay for bills we've already paid for because we haven't gotten paid for work we already completed. And it was just this constant in and out of, like, we did $3 million a year and we spent $3 million a year. It was that constant battle of, like, how did we do $300,000 in work this month but made no money? And then the next month we make $100K, and then the month after that we lose $100K. Like, it was just mind blowing to me. Like, when I filed my 2023 taxes, like, on paper, that company made no money. I mean, it's more convoluted than that, because the business paid some of my personal expenses. So I took a salary, but on paper, the company itself didn't make any money, doing $3 million a year in revenue. Yeah. And that's the reason I got out of construction. Yeah. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're well way over time, but you've shared so many good golden nuggets. Is there anything you would tell your younger self, maybe right before taking over the business, or even younger, that you're like, oh man, that's something that I wish I would have known, or someone would have told me?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think the biggest thing is that I had this mentality of you have to spend money to make money, and while that is true, what I didn't understand was that you have to spend money to grow and scale, but you have to have the right systems in place in order to grow and scale profitably. And it's the classic expression of, like, you build a house on a sand foundation versus building a concrete foundation and then building one wall at a time. And it's the mistake that I've seen so many people make. I have multiple business friends that are in their second or third company because the first one went underwater because they scaled and grew too fast. And I went from a one-man show handyman company to 15 employees and $3 million a year in the span of like 3.5 to 4 years. And it was way too fast. I didn't have good systems in place. I didn't have good training in place. I put people into positions and management positions and sales positions that weren't ready for it yet. I stepped out of certain parts of the business that I should have stayed in, and I stayed in certain parts of the business that I should have stepped out of. And what I'm doing with this company, and what I would recommend to my younger self, is to focus on, I guess, focus on building out the foundation and building out everything really well at the size you currently are before trying to grow it. Bringing more money into the company doesn't fix your problems. It just makes the problems bigger. So it's the classic expression of, like, if you put a fancy paint job on a rusty car, eventually the car is still going to rust through the paint job. So you have to fix the base level first before you put the next step and the next step and the next step on. It's the colloquial expression of, like, don't put drywall on a rotten wall.
Yeah, because you're going to end up fixing it all over again.
It's going to end up being fixed again. And it's just going to be a bigger problem that costs you more money. And
That's
at
right.
the end of the day, I mean, there are some lessons you have to learn the hard way, but I wished I had known what I know now sooner so that I could have changed things and done things differently.
Yeah.
But I also know that I'm the business owner I am now because of all the mistakes I made.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard because your younger
Yeah.
self probably wouldn't have listened to the advice you just gave. you know,
Yeah. I mean,
and sometimes you got to learn some things the hard way.
yeah, good lessons are expensive. The best lessons are really expensive and they usually hurt.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the fun things too about our community too, and in our Facebook groups and being a part of the Super Pros is you kind of have a
Hmm.
network of other pros that have probably done similar mistakes or
Hmm.
other expensive mistakes.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the community, or what do you see that you encourage folks to do?
So a couple of things. One is if you're listening to this and you're not a super pro and you qualify for the program, definitely consider it because the house call main big group is awesome. But if you are at a point in business where you are kind of past the basics, past the growth phase, and you're trying to be around other people that are further along in the process, the super
Hmm.
pros page is where I spend 90% of my time now. The big group is awesome, but it's a lot of the same people, like the same type of people asking the same more simple questions. And the like, how do I find a customer in the estimates tab? And as much as I love helping with that, I try to whenever I can, and I'm on Facebook. But if
Yeah.
I have a problem that I need help with, I know that I can go to that super pros group and have other people that have been in the same position and the same problem because almost
Mm.
everybody in that group is a bigger, more established company that's been through the ringer a couple of times and knows what's up. And I feel like the questions there and the people there are a next step above a lot of the people that are brand new in business. And I
Yeah.
love working with brand new business owners. I mean, I have my own podcast and my own group on school and my own folks that I work with on that. And I love mentoring and pouring into new business owners. But I also love having that community of those higher level folks too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as being a super pro too, you get to know what things are coming down the
Hmm.
pipeline,
You get to
but you get
try a lot of
access to
cool new
some of
stuff. Yeah.
you get all the cool new stuff, and they're not always like fully battle tested or battle worn, but
Hmm.
like it's going to keep your business well beyond any other business,
Yeah.
in your area because you're getting to play
Yeah.
with the newest stuff all the time.
Well, and I love testing out new features. Like a great example is like I'm really loving the call flow menu that you guys just released. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
actually released to all the super pros or if I'm a beta tester. I can't remember, but I'm working on setting that up right now. And the basic version's pretty cool. Me and my wife actually today are going to record individual personalized audio messages for each menu, so it sounds
Yep.
more personable instead of the robot voice. But even
Yep.
with the robot voice, it's already so much better and more professional. And it's going to allow me to route traffic to the right person where I can get an existing customer who's already got a job out in the field will end up with my field supervisor. Somebody that wants to talk to a manager will end up with me, but the endless list of inquiries and spam calls will end up with my VA that handles that instead of me having to forward them or pass them along. And instead of
Yeah.
having to have my VA or myself act as a call screener, the menu screens out a lot of people, and it already has lowered our spam call quantity by a lot.
I'd say that's like the main feature of that.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, like the other things are really important for business too. But I feel like asking a spam caller to click a button, they're just not going to do it, and so you
They're not
don't
going to do it.
you don't
Yeah.
have to waste your time to do
Yep.
that because none of those robocallers will actually go do that
Yeah.
piece of the next step, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because it's a solution to the only complaint I ever had about Housecall Pro Voice, which I love voice, but the one thing that drove me absolutely nuts is that I can't block people.
Yep.
So that was the one complaint I had with signing up for voice was like, man, because the number that I have in voice that is our company line used to be my personal cell number. And I had
okay.
quite literally probably 1,000 people in my blocked number list because I got so many spam calls and I would just unsubscribe, block people left and right all the time. And it was never ending. But then once I switched to voice, I think a lot of those people that I had blocked are now getting through. So I'm hoping the call
Right.
menu, it seems like the call menu is preventing a lot of those people from getting through because when I look through our call flow from me and my VA, I see a lot less like spam, 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 spam. And it's very infrequent. And it's usually the people that are like, they're still spam, but they're like a marketing company that's an actual live person trying to get a hold of me to offer me services, which I
Yep.
still have to get on the phone and say, stop calling me. But at least instead of getting 20 robocalls or call center type calls, I'm only getting one or two every day instead of 20.
Yeah, and also by the way, if you do end up speaking to a human on the end and you ask them to take you off the call list, it's much more likely that's going to happen versus if you try to tell a robocall or whatever, where it's like click to
a robocall or
unsubscribe.
a call center in another country somewhere. Yeah.
That's not going to happen. That's not
No.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're going to have to do a second edition of this podcast. We're definitely well over time. Chris,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing so many of your golden nuggets. Maybe we'll have to even split this one into two, and I'll be up to the editors. But for everyone else that's still listening, hopefully you got some great tips from here, and we've got another special guest lined up for next week. And Chris, thanks again for joining us on the Superpro podcast.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
The Superpro podcast is brought to you by Housecall Pro, the leading platform for the home service industry. Housecall Pro streamlines your workflows and simplifies everything from scheduling and dispatching to communication and billing. Unlock the full potential of your home service business with Housecall Pro. Work smarter and more efficiently with streamlined workflows and detailed analytics. Win more business and serve your customers well, every single time. Join more than 40,000 home service pros who have already revolutionized their businesses. Work smarter with streamlined workflows, get organized with centralized information, and scale your business your way. Learn more at housecallpro.com.